Hey everyone, ever wondered if the killers of the realm actually like what they're doing? Do they even enjoy the endless trials and what goes on within them? The truth is, there is no single truth for them all, but instead many varying thoughts on the trials, whether it's love or hate. Let's explore it today and place each character into one of these 6 categories. Trapper is a tough case as throughout his lore he flip-flops a lot on what he wants, and what his intentions are, and who he wants to be loyal to. Part of him wants to support his workers and fight for their rights, but another darker side of him sees them as maggots like his father does, and wants to punish and rule over them with an iron fist. In the realm this persists, I think. Trapper can be cruel and ruthless toward the survivors, but he also has moments of rebellion against the entity, similar to how he rebelled against his father. As a consequence for his rebellion, he is punished with hooks piercing his skin, leaving him in constant pain. I do think due to Trapper's clear resistance that it means he is more than likely leaning toward the side of not enjoying the trials. Existence in them, after all, seems to be genuinely painful, with him groaning even when he leans down to pick up a trap. An old survivor of the trials, Benedict Baker, named him the miserable smiling killer for a reason. Beneath the grin of his mask, he's really having quite a terrible time. Despite this though, he does still undeniably gain a thrill from the trials. He still does have a darker side, even if he is more inclined to rebel. Perks like Agitation give us an insight into this, stating, "You get excited in anticipation of hooking your prey." Evan may be more sympathetic to the survivors than most, but he does still get some thrill from hunting the survivors, even with the constant pain he's in. Trapper therefore falls into having a bad time. Wraith is next, and a character that seems rather empty in the realm. He appears almost like a shell or ghost of his former self, hence the name Wraith. He never wanted this life, and actively tried to escape it, but the entity followed him. Under the employment of Azarov, Philip caused the deaths of many, unknowingly. This is something that will forever haunt him, and now in the realm I can't imagine he likes it either, but instead does it out of necessity for survival. And because he realizes there's no escaping this entity that has haunted his life, he simply must obey and do what it says or suffer further punishment. Many believe the theory that he rings his bell in the realm on purpose to alert the survivors of his presence. In his lore and early life he failed to alert his village with a bell, which led to it being raided and destroyed. He feels a lot of guilt for this, and so is likely trying to repent almost in the realm, trying to at least give the survivors a chance, but ultimately knowing he can't disobey the entity. Wraith to me falls into having a terrible time. Billy is a character that would have varied a lot depending on when he was taken, but the Billy we have in the realm is quite an angry and vengeful character who seems to enjoy the trials and the role he plays in them. He had an abusive upbringing, and upon gaining revenge on his tormentors, he seems a bit too far gone. He's too messed up from being treated like a monster that he ultimately becomes one. The only argument against Billy's enjoyment would be that he isn't free anymore. He fought all his life to be free, and wished he could be as he peered from his small shed on Coldwind Farm. Therefore the realm may feel a bit restricted. The entity seems to treat Billy well though, and so I think for the most part he is happy to be there and does enjoy the trials. Billy is having a good time. Nurse is a character who may struggle to enjoy the trials despite having a hatred for many people who she believed to be undeserving of life before the realm, as she is in a constant state of pain. Her body is likely burned and quite withered, just destroyed. Whenever she blinks, she screams out in pain because the action of blinking is so painful, and seems to cause some kind of burning sensation. Despite all this, there are references made to her enjoying the realm, such as Thanatophobia's flavor text reading, "She plays with us and revels in our pain." A hint that despite the absolute pain and horror she is going through with her blinks and survival in the realm, she does still get that twisted enjoyment, reveling in the pain she's causing. With this said, I doubt she is having a good time because of this. It's likely more just a redeeming factor for her. The pain surely has to outweigh it. Therefore, I think she's having a bad time. Myers I don't think has much opinion on the trials, with him seeming emotionless throughout Halloween night and still now in the realm. He seems driven by an innate desire to be evil, and not really out of a like or dislike necessarily for the trials or what goes on within them. Therefore I quite simply think Myers will have little to no opinion. Hag is a tough one to judge, as the human Lisa within the Hag is very far gone, and doesn't even resemble the person she once was. However, she does does seem very bloodthirsty and does gain enjoyment from the trials, with her stated to be ignited by the false hope of survivors. I think it shows that the power of the hexes have overcome her, and now she is more monster than human, and so is more inclined to enjoy the trials and hunting down the survivors. Ever since she's made that agreement with the entity, Lisa was changed forever, and will likely never be the same again. Lisa wouldn't enjoy the trials, but I think the hag does. Maybe not to the point of loving them or anything, but definite enjoyment. Hag is having a good time. Doctor is a character clearly enjoying himself in the realm, getting to continue his experiments forever, and now with an inexhaustible spark within his heart, allowing easy access electroshock therapy. He's a messed up guy, he liked doing what he did, and even out of the trials he seems to persist with his experiments, granted wishes by the entity in his free time. The trials themselves he laughs throughout maniacally, almost as if he can't believe his luck in getting here and being able to do what he does in the trials so freely. He is likely quite crazy and not all there, but I do think despite this he is gaining intense enjoyment from the trials themselves. Doctor is having a great time. Huntress may feel a lack of freedom in the trials, but looking at things like her perks tells a different story of her being very bloodthirsty and enjoying the hunt so intensely that any of that stuff may not matter to her. She may enjoy the trials greatly regardless. Take Beast of Prey's flavor text for example, which states, "Your lust for a kill is so intense that your connection with the entity is momentarily lost." She also has a great love for the dread her song or hum causes, and seems to genuinely just be really into causing fear and hunting down the survivors. I suppose the trials can't be all too bad freedom-wise for her too, as she does get her realm of the Red Forest, and her home or cabin. The only thing she doesn't get to do is fulfill her motherly role when she steals girls, but I suppose in the trials this may be lost on her, with her instead simply desiring and loving the hunt. Therefore, I think she's having a great time. Bubba is a character most definitely not having a good time, being in a constant state of anger, bewilderment, and stress as he tries to make his way throughout the confusing trials. Bubba is driven by fear, first by his family, and then more intensely in the realm by the entity, with it threatening and even attacking him directly to get him to serve it. Bubba likely finds the trials quite confusing and just odd, but he gets the general idea that he needs to stop the survivors from escaping, much like how he did back on his family's land. He's very unhappy and does not enjoy the trials, I think, with him even having a tantrum if he so much as collides with an object that isn't a survivor at all. This was something prior that took the entire events of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but now it happens a bunch, showing his state of mind. He's having tantrums left and right. Bubba is having a terrible time. Freddy, I think, actually isn't having that great a time. I think he likely gets enjoyment from the trials, but not as much as he would if he were free, and if he were able to simply hunt and haunt who he wants. He's very much under the control of the entity now, and adjusted and changed based on what the entity wants. He's not quite the unstoppable monster he was back in the real world. He's also very weak in the trials and receives many nerfs, which do have to count for something. He gets far less freedom and creativity with what he can do, and so despite it being the kind of environment he would typically love, I do think he would be stunted in his enjoyment due to these things. Even his perks seem to reference his anger for losing his prey, more so over his desire or enjoyment of actually catching them. Freddy still enjoys the trials, I think, but due to the downsides, he's just having an okay time. Pig is a character I imagine is enjoying herself, but might have a few hang-ups and questions about what she's doing. She seems to believe the entity is the next stage of her journey that Jigsaw wanted for her at the end of her lore, but this isn't the case. Therefore in the trials she likely believes she's completing his will, even though she's not at all really. She must question this from time to time, seeing the trials as too brutal and less fair to Jigsaw's standards, but then other times she likely views them in the way she might, of it being the right thing. I think she's somewhere in the middle of enjoyment therefore, having times of enjoyment but times of reflection, unsure of if the survivors really deserve to enter into one of her games. Amanda is having an okay time. Clown I think is having a good time in the trials. He laughs, he gets to be free and attack people without consequence, and he even got to bring Maurice to the realm, and even into the trials too. He even gets to pocket an odd finger now and then, so it's basically everything he ever wanted. Yeah, I think Clown is simply having a great time. Spirit is a character very torn about the trials and what she does within them, and you can see this on her face too. You can see her expression change from Rin, herself, and the spirit. Rin is horrified and scared, tired, and the spirit is filled with anger and a look of hunger almost for violence. It's hard therefore to decide what she might feel like. I would lean more toward dislike though, with her body cut up and constantly twitching, and her becoming aware of her situation every few seconds. I also think her evil side is more angry and it's less about enjoying the trials. We could debatably split this one into two, with her sort of belonging to both the highest tier and the lowest tier, depending on if she's angry or if her humanity breaks through. I don't think she's in complete hatred of the trials, because she does still show her evil, spirit side, but I think her human side breaking through brings her overall enjoyment down to having a bad time. Legion seems to basically be having a blast in the trials and the realm. They get to be the powerful serial killers they wanted to be, fulfilling their teenage dreams and power fantasies, and they get to do it all together too. They may not quite realize the full consequences of their commitment yet, but I do think they're enjoying it regardless, with the entity even seeming to give them favor with it laying down some beats on their mixtape. Their power is described as them drawing power from the thrilling freedom of not abiding to any rule but their own, which isn't true, they abide by the entities. However, I imagine what they mean is the rules of the law in the real world. They can hunt and kill in the realm without consequence, and so to them it's like a paradise. So for now I think they're having a great time. Plague is an interesting one, and a bit of both I think. On one hand, she's reached her god's realm, and now gets to serve it personally. However, she doesn't have the best existence. She's constantly infected by the plague, she's forced to vomit in order to partake in the trials, and many actions in the realm seem to cause her genuine distress, like being stunned. She sounds really annoyed, but then she's in her god's realm as its personal servant, and may feel as if she's still saving her people by doing so. Therefore, I think she has to feel at least okay about the trials. Not happy, not sad, but just okay about them. They are what they are, and they're what her god wants, and so she will serve. Plague goes to having an okay time. And Ghostface, from his body language alone, is clearly just chilling and having quite a good time in the realm. My only thoughts against his enjoyment is that he doesn't get as much freedom and can't really go through his cycle of tormenting a town with his stories. With this said, he's the entity's favourite in the realm. He gets to persistently do what he loves in the trials and get away with it easily. He doesn't have to worry about the consequences of reality in the realm, which is maybe the only reason why he took so much precaution before. He clearly loves what he does here, taking pictures and laughing in the lobby. Also, it's got to be a good feeling for someone like that to get the approval of an ancient evil being who likes your work so much that they give you small benefits, favors, and even fashion flair, like with his floaty outfit. Demogorgon seemingly just follows whatever master controls it, and does not have much opinion on the trials likely. If it's being controlled in a similar way to how the Mind Flayer and One were controlling it, then it probably doesn't think much. Therefore, I think Demo would have little to no opinion. Oni is a character that may seem like he loves the trials and all the murder he gets to do, but Oni is actually a very sad and angry guy. He hates that he's become an Oni, and he feels a lot of shame and guilt that he caused his family's downfall. Now in the realm, I think he exerts his anger onto the survivors, but I don't think he necessarily enjoys it. It's simply an outlet of emotions for him. All the stored up anger, frustration, and guilt bursting out, and the survivors taking the brunt of it. He likely gets a little enjoyment still, but not quite as much as you might imagine upon initially seeing him. Oni would be having a bad time. Deathslinger is a character that might have felt differently had we seen him taken at a different point in time. However, at the end of his lore, it makes clear that he's too far gone. He's fully committed to his slinging of death, and he even laughs a lot in the trials and appears to enjoy the suffering he causes. He's also a bit angry like Oni, but as he more than likely sees the survivors as people who wronged him in the past, he likely gets a lot of enjoyment from hunting them. He does also likely have a small feeling of something not being quite right though, and understanding that he is too far gone and subtly mourning what he could have been. However, he's mostly enjoying the trials, I think. Therefore, Deathslinger is likely having a good time. Pyramid Head, I think, basically has no opinion or emotion toward what he's doing. In his lore, he accepts the entity's offer to enter the realm, and so I think that's about all the emotion that's there. It's like accepting a job, and so the trials are simply work. I think he would have little to no opinion. Blight, I've changed my mind a bit on. The more I think about it, the more I think he must be having quite a terrible time. He's a man completely broken and destroyed by his use of the Blight serum, a man who set out to find other dimensions, found this one, was tossed to the void, scraping his way to survival after creating the serum, and subsequently being tossed into the trials as his body slowly collapsed and fell apart from overuse of the serum, to the point he is barely human or resembles what he once was. Injecting himself every 20 or so seconds cannot be a nice experience, and he seems to do so out of necessity to survive. He sounds pained in the trials, he sounds angry, and just like he's having a tough time. The Blight is not Talbot Grimes anymore, it's a distorted, broken shadow of him. Blight goes into having a terrible time. Twins are an interesting case, and I think they fall somewhere toward not liking the trials, and this is because they have to be quite exhausting and traumatic, especially for Charlotte. For one, they're forced to hunt down the survivors, which Charlotte must see as some injustice after being hunted down herself for her whole life. The other thing is she has to witness Victor being crushed every time and reappearing, reliving her trauma of him dying over and over. In the trial grounds, Charlotte sounds quite annoyed and angry, whereas out of them she appears fairly content to just vibing with Victor. I think the deal she has with the entity to have safety for her and Victor is good, but I don't think she enjoys the trial part of it all, and instead sees it as a simple requirement for their safety. If she could, I think she would stop. She has nothing in particular indicating enjoyment, yet as this is the price for her and Victor's safety, I don't think she would completely hate the trials either. I just don't think she'd have too much of a favourable outlook on them. So for twins, I'm saying they're having a bad time. Trickster just sounds like he's having a great time. He gets to perform, he gets to kill, he's sort of in paradise in the trials, and doesn't have to hide it anymore either, which I do think is a big factor for his enjoyment. He gets to be open about it, laugh as he goes, and even chuck his autograph down onto people after a Mori. Trickster is quite a simple case, I think. All signs point to him having a great time. Nemesis I do think enjoys the trials, but likely not excessively, just quite a bit. I think he likely enjoys the thrill of the chase and playing around with his prey, many of the similar qualities that he's shown to have when he hunts Jill and Starsdown in Raccoon City. In the realm, I think he'd feel a similar way, with nothing necessarily indicating that he wouldn't enjoy it. He's a bit slower and nerfed down from what he once was, which is maybe an argument. However, he does get to eternally hunt down the survivors, completing his goals for the entity, and he also gets to hunt stars and finish them for what could well be near to an eternity, so I reckon he's pretty content. Nemesis is having a good time. Pinhead seems to just be treating the realm a bit like work, like Pyramid Head does, using it almost to make his job easier and sending those who open the box back to the labyrinth. I do think he enjoys the realm more as well, as he feels fulfilled with the pleasure and pain present within the trials. His perks also gives him hints that he likes tormenting the survivors and their failure to escape. The only place he'd rather be, I imagine, is the labyrinth. Therefore, Pinhead is having a good time. Artist is debatable, as it's unclear how aware she is of what she's becoming with her appearing very crow-like nowadays. She's an individual with intense guilt over what happened to her friends, and she also mourns her past self, I imagine, and her lost hands and tongue. Her screeches in the realm and actions seem as if she had somewhat embraced the monster she's become, but not completely. Her perks also give insight that she has intense pain within herself, meaning she's likely not enjoying the trials. This is also why the entity likes her. It perfectly crafted her story to amplify the emotions she feels within the realm and the trials. In terms of her perspective though, I don't think she's having that great a time. She likely realizes her actions are bad and doesn't want to be doing what she does, but realizes there's no other way, and in some ways she probably feels guilt, which only leads her more into the path of feeling like a monster. She's a loyal servant to the entity, but I think she is overall struggling and having a bad time. Sadako I actually don't think would be enjoying the trials much, and only because she is free much enjoyment out of killing. She seems to mainly do it out of anger over enjoyment. Therefore I think she just sees the trials with some sort of apathy toward them. Just an outlet for her anger, with maybe a mild sense of enjoyment for what she gets to freely do to the survivors now that she's no longer in the well. Sadako would be having an okay time. Dredge is a tough one, as it doesn't show much emotion, and there's nothing really to indicate that it enjoys or dislikes the trials. It seems to be a creature driven by evil and darkness, and so it likely feels at home in the trials, hunting the survivors, but I'm not sure we can attribute enjoyment onto it. There's moments in the lore where it's clear it's sentient and aware of what it's doing, but this doesn't necessarily indicate enjoyment, just awareness, so Dredge would have little to no opinion. Wesker, I think from his actions and in-game quips, he does seem to be having a pretty good time in the trials. He gets to exert his power and feel superior to the survivors, which is likely a good good ego boost for him. However, he is restricted in the trials somewhat, he doesn't get to experiment much, and he has to follow quite strict rules, leaving him bored sometimes maybe. For the most part though, I imagine he simply enjoys himself, and he certainly sounds like he is. His energy never seems to drop, aside a few moments of anger. Wesker is having a good time. Knight, upon finding the realm, sees it as a paradise, the sublime, he says. He does seem to enjoy the trials too, and gets to summon each of his boys when he needs them also. I imagine if his reaction initially was to call it a paradise, he likely does feel this way still. It could change of course, but due to his love for violence and desire to feel powerful, I do think he would enjoy the trials for those rather simple reasons. Knight is having a great time. Skull Merchant I had a bit of back and forth on, but I think she's having a good time. Ultimately, she gets to fully embrace her role and character of the Skull Merchant, not sometimes but always, and can almost become her, which Adriana does seem to love. Therefore, I think the realm and the trials allowing such a freedom would mean she basically adores it. She gets to hunt various people, many of them posing the kind of challenges she always wanted. Therefore, I think Skull Merchant is having a great time. Singularity I think is similar to Wesker. He enjoys the feeling of power and dominating what he views as a weaker species almost. But he's also very restricted by the trials and its rules, and he likely does not get much freedom to do what he wants if he wants to do something else. Hux does things like assess the gene integrity mid-trial, but he doesn't actually get to act on it, really, unless he marries someone. Therefore, I do think Hux is largely enjoying the trials, but definitely has some hang-ups about them too, and feels restricted. He does get to fulfill his main goal though of destroying humanity, so I think he's having a good time. Xenomorph is an odd one, and my initial thoughts are that it wouldn't be too opinionated because it's simply trying to survive in the trials and do what it can to make sure the Xenomorphs survive. Maybe it could get a bit confused though, considering it isn't trying to implant anyone and has to instead hook the survivors. It's a weird setup for Xeno, which would maybe cause it to dislike the trials themselves. It's acting against its usual behavior and out of its natural environment, forced to perform in a certain way by the entity and likely at the threat of its world and the other Xenomorphs being destroyed. It shrieks quite sharply when getting stunned and doesn't seem to be enjoying the realm or trials much at all really. Maybe it gets some excitement and joy from hooking the survivors due to a human, Ripley, being responsible for its initial ejection into open space. Therefore, if it does have an emotional opinion of the trials and how they go, I think it would find them quite confusing and irritating, and therefore it would be having a bad time. Chucky is clearly enjoying himself. He laughs maniacally, he shoots lots of quips and things like that. He's clearly just enjoying himself quite a bit. I think he's reached the point where he's not so concerned with getting a human body anymore, and he's embraced his role and fame as the murderous doll. In the trials he gets to roam free and do what he loves, and so he more than likely is having a blast in the trials. He is quite angry too, but that's just part of his personality I think. It's not necessarily clear rage at the trials themselves. I think Chucky is almost definitely enjoying his time in the trials, with his greatest frustrations maybe being survivors evading him too long, but I think that likely just compels him to catch them and doesn't kill his enjoyment necessarily. Chucky I think is having a great time. Unknown does not seem to be too fond of the realm or the entity, but it does seem to be okay with the trials and getting to interact with the survivors, fooling them with its deceptions and luring them in with its voice lines. I don't think Unknown is too thrilled, and would rather be free, but I don't think it's completely miserable either. It's just rolling with it sort of, feeling just okay with its current position in the realm. It mentions some enjoyment in the perk Unbound, with it mentioning it getting excited when pain lingers in the air. It does also seem to think it will eventually escape too, with it stating it won't be denied its happiness, which could be its freedom. This could be an argument too for it not enjoying the trials, but to be fair we don't know if that's referring to its time in the realm or not. It's speculation, and it does still get to mostly do what it was doing before anyway, so therefore I will put it in having an okay time. Vecna has been restricted in power by the entity with the mark placed upon his back, which essentially nerfs him down and stops him from unleashing his true potential. However, I don't think this actually affects Vecna's enjoyment of the trials too much, and if anything may even enhance it. If it was too easy after all, I doubt he would enjoy it much. That and the fact that he seems to understand the realm and his need to play a part in it if he ever wants to gain control of the realm and overthrow the entity. It's going to be a gradual process, and he directly states he will play his part for now. Therefore, I think in the meantime, he's likely just having a good time, enjoying what he does. He may not even just enjoy the trials necessarily for the killing or hunting of the survivors, but possibly more so because he gets to study the realm, which appears to be his greater interest, to get an understanding of this mysterious, powerful realm and its ruler. Therefore, time in the trials is time spent studying and learning about this hugely powerful foe. Vecna, I think, is having a good time. Dracula had been basically killed upon coming to the realm, and despite his lowered power and now his servitude to a greater power than himself, he does still get some comforts such as his castle travelling with him to each trial he enters. Therefore, I think he is likely enjoying the trial still, getting to exert his power over the survivors and fulfill his power role and keep many of the comforts he had before. His lore does mention he has a desire to continue his dark vengeance on humanity, so I suppose he does get to do that here. I do think he is more restricted though, and likely would want to escape at some point and get revenge on the Belmonts. I suppose he has Trevor here at least, which is maybe enough revenge for him. However, due to his ego, I think maybe not, so I think he would enjoy the trials and the realm, but would be held back from complete enjoyment. Dracula would be having a good time. Houndmaster is a character who does appear to enjoy the trials. She seems rather upbeat during them, she seems quite happy honestly to hunt the survivors down with Snug, showing off her strength and prowess. She seems to pride herself on this a lot and enjoy the feeling of power. Therefore, I do think she's enjoying the trials. The only downside is that she doesn't get to hunt her enemy, Molak. He was pulled into the fog but disappeared afterwards. It's possible the entity is almost using him as a means to motivate Portia to serve it, so there could be a bit of resentment there, causing the trials to be slightly less fun. Overall though, I think she's having a good time. Let me know where you would place these characters to, and anything additional you want to add. I am interested to hear. Thanks, and goodbye.